What you are seeing here is the refill kit that is available from Stampin' Up! For the latest paper pumpkin. There are enough supplies to make 8 cards. The refill kit is $10 plus shipping, handling, and tax. You also get the stencils and the sponge that were a free gift with this set. You will get everything you need to make the card that I'm going to show you, except for ink and a few pieces of cardstock. Hello, Stampers. My name is Helen Borer. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Seward, Nebraska, and I am going to show you how to use the stencils that came with your paper pumpkin. I have just watched a fantastic video from a person called Creative Chelsea. Her name is Chelsea Christensen, and she did a fantastic job of showing the versatility of these stencils. So what we're going to make together is a complete case of her card. This was my first attempt. We'll see if we can do a little better. On this one, I want to bring the mountains up a little bit and make the cloud part smaller. So let's get started. To do this, we need a card base. It's just Whisper White, 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4. The background piece, we're going to use this crumb cake 4 by 5 1/4. On Creative Chelsea's video, she actually used an envelope and cut it apart. So if you did not have the crumb cake, you could use an envelope. And then the piece we're going to work with the most is this white piece. It is 3 11/16 by 5. Now this is just one little tick mark under 3 3/4. And the total reason for that is because the opening in these stencils is 3 3/4, and we need it to fit in between. So any measurement that'll fit in between will work. So let's get started. For starters, this card uses all 4 of the stencils, which is quite creative. The first thing we want to do is line up our paper on the grid paper and tape it down with some washi tape or some painter's tape. And I am going to place a strip of tape down at the bottom. And this will create a hinge that will let us manipulate that a little bit. Okay, we're going to start by doing the stars. I'm also going to change up the color scheme just a little bit here. But okay, so I used blueberry bushel for the stars. We used basically, I think I put the stars down like 1 1/4 inches, which would be 5 squares here down. And I positioned it there and then used some more washi tape to hold it still. Okay, so the kit and the stencils came with these sponges, which you may or may not already know are being discontinued. And I think they're being discontinued because we now have a better alternative, which is our blending brushes. So I'm going to do, myself, I prefer the blending brushes. I'm going to do part of this with sponges and part without. So basically all I've done here is to cut some wedges off of the sponge. You cut it, sometimes I cut them in 4, sometimes this one's in 6. Okay, so we're going to start with this blueberry bushel ink, and we'll start with the sponge. And so you ink up your sponge, and you kind of have to go and push it into the little stars. And I'm going to ink up this side here using the sponge, and then I'm going to do the other side with this brush. It has basically been cleaned, so I'm putting it into the blue. And okay, one thing that we need to do here is we need to, and I should have done this in the beginning. I don't know what I did with my sticky notes. A couple of sticky notes will help you quite a bit here. I'm going to try to avoid the partial stars here because we don't need partial stars, but it won't hurt anything. So we're gonna just, and I find this blending brush to be way easier, but you do need the protection of the Post-it notes or a piece of paper. Okay, so we're going to call that good. Take off our Post-it notes. We can pick up one side of this and see how it looks, see if we want to change anything. And I think we will just let it be. Okay, so as you can see from the card I didn't put these quite as far down as I did on this card, but that's kind of what I wanted. I also used Seaside Spray for this next color, but I'm going to switch to Balmy Blue. And we're going to switch to our cloud template, or stencil. And basically, we're going to stick our card behind, because we don't want the sharp line that you're going to get if you leave that if you leave that border up there. So what we want is to put in a line that is clouds. We're going to grab our washi tape here and tape down our stencil. The moving stencil can be a problem. And we'll start again with the sponge, although I prefer the blending brushes. Okay, we're going to make sure we're kind of get the darker ink off the sponge because we don't want it that dark. And what we're trying to do is basically the sky. And all we're going to do is go along here, and then we're going to, with less ink on the sponge, go up way off the edge for our sky. So that's all we want to do at this point. And you can see here that we now have this top skyline. Okay, for the next skyline, okay, so that was using like the top of the stencil. For the next skyline, we're going to use this piece at the bottom. We're going to, okay, how did I do that? Okay, we're going to stick it in like that because we don't want a sharp edge at the bottom. We want to leave a little white, although not as much as I had before. So I don't know how far to go. What I have done here is the top of our card is right at the bottom of that cloud. We're going to tape it down. And here again, unless you want to be very careful, and we're going to use sticky notes to cover up these clouds. We're going to use our balmy blue again, and I'm just going to use the blending brush. So I'm here, I want to get the darker ink off of our sponge. And what we want is a nice line right at the top, and then we'll blend it down a ways. And it'll be down till it reaches the mountain, which we'll put in later. I actually find this very fun to play with. I think that'll probably be good. So we'll take off our sticky notes and our stencil. And here you can compare that to what we have going here. And we didn't go up nearly as much as I thought we did, but we want to bring the mountain farther up. Okay, so that was our cloud stencil. Let's now bring in the mountain stencil. The mountain stencil has a number of different views. We have the little pieces, like those are the dark part of the mountain, and they follow this this edge of the stencil. And on my card, I use the stencil turned over. There, you know, that's also another option for whatever you do. So we're going to position this stencil in here so that we can make the mountain. Okay, this side will give us the edge of the mountain. If we do this here, it would kind of color above the mountain. So we're going to use this end of the stencil to give us our mountain shape. We don't want that nearly as low as I had it last time. Let's try it right there. We're going to tape down our stencil. Okay, so we also want to cover up so we don't go over that line. So let's use our Post-it notes. This one's losing its sticky. And okay, basically here I used Gorgeous Grape and Highland Heather. On this one I'm going to use Rich Razzleberry and Merry Merlot. So we could take a sponge, but I much prefer this blending brush. And so we're going to come in, and what we want is like a dark edge. And then, you know, a little bit of blending down. Okay, so there we have the top of our mountain. And what we want here is those parts that are darker. We want to fill some of those in. You can see your mountain through the stencil. So we're going to take that. And I think for this one, I will use a sponge. The sponge may be just a little easier to control how much. Okay, and I've switched to Merry Merlot here. And we're just dabbing it through. Okay, and that will give us some darker areas for our mountain. Okay, so then what we want to do is the next mountain. And for the next mountain, okay, so we already used that. So I think for our next mountain, we'll use this piece. And on this one, we actually wanted a straight line. So we'll use it on top of our paper. And we'll use our sticky notes to cover up down here. And then we're going to use Merry Merlot for that lower mountain. I'm going to use just the blending brush here. We don't necessarily want it real smooth. I'm pouncing it a little bit, give our mountain some texture. And let's see what we got here. There. Now what I do think I want is just a little more coverage in there. That was with our Rich Razzleberry. So I'm going to clean my sponge a little, or my brush. And we'll come in and we'll just shade that just a bit. There, okay, so now we have our mountain. I really would like a little bit darker. No, okay, which side did we use? That's the hard part here. It's trying to decide what we used. I would like a little bit more definition between the mountain and, so let's try some the sponge and go just a little darker right at the top of the mountain. Oops. I should have taped down my mask because it's hard to hold on. But there, that has given us a little bit more definition. Okay, so there we have now used our mountain stencils, our stars and our clouds. And I see I boogered, well, no, that's part of the star. Okay, so the next thing is the sun stencil. And okay, so one thing you can do with these stencils is you can use them to mask. Okay, so this layer here will mask off our mountains because we don't want the sun. Okay, how do we do that? So we're going to put, well, no, we need it the other way. So the part we're masking off, no. We're going to use this top part to mask off our mountains. Slip this under here. One thing you need to be careful of is that there is ink on these stencils, and so you need to be a little bit careful that way for keeping your project clean. Okay, so we're going to mask off the mountain that we have done. Never can find the edge. Okay, this way we don't get our sun on the mountain. And then I didn't want the whole sun like on here. So we're going to lay this next stencil down so we get as much of so we only get part of the sun. We're going to then tape this stencil down so that it doesn't shift on us. And then we're going to switch to crushed curry ink. I don't know that I want to clean that enough. Let's just use a sponge. Okay, this sun stencil is quite delicate in that these can move and shift. So you want to pounce just up and down and pounce your color on pretty much. Now we don't want a sharp outline, so we don't want to go all the way to those edges. We just want to go up a ways. As far as the stenciling goes, this one is the touchiest stencil. But it really gives a nice effect. Now here we can go all the way to the edge of the paper. Okay, so I think that's probably pretty good. Let's remove our stencil, and there's our sun. We can remove our mountain stencil. Okay, and I didn't do a real good job. Apparently our sun is let's try doing some more and getting in closer to our mountain. It's a little better. There, that's much better. It's not as good as if I'd have done it right the first time, but there it is. That's all the stencil work. Okay, the next thing I did was put in trees. Now the stamp set comes with trees, but I want to show you that without the stamp set, you can also use this stencil here to put in your trees. So looks like I've kind of damaged my stencil from the last time. So we're going to take this and put it down at the bottom. And we can put in trees. We're going to use Mossy Meadow. Now I used, I believe, the sponge with this for the most part. But we can sponge those trees in here. Let's go a little darker up there at the top, and we can move that and see there. Oops, talk about stupid. You have to remove your washi tape here. So we can put our stencils back down. Okay, so there are some stenciled trees. Now this is far easier with the stamp. So on my previous card, all of these were done with the stencils. But let's try using the stamp. And adding some more trees with the stamp. Okay, so we have them nicely inked. And let's go over here and just add some trees. Okay, another thing you can do when you're using the stamp is to stamp off and then add some trees, and it'll look like you have, you know, a whole lot more trees in here. Let's just go right there. And so there's our trees. The stamps are easier to use, but even if you are getting a refill kit that doesn't have the stamps, you will have that stencil of the trees from the punch-outs. Okay, so then the only other thing I did with my card here was sponge some green down here at the bottom, like for grass. And for that I used just jade. And we're going to go back to this brush and the jade and just start down here in the corner. Looks like we're also picking up some, maybe some Mary Merlot, but it looks okay. And I'm going to go over here so that there's no stark white edges. And we'll sponge through the line of our mountain. And we'll call that good. So then all we did here is create the card. We layered this on a card base, or on a layer. And I tied some string around. Last time I tied the string around this and the layer. Let's do it just around this piece. And let's decide how much we need here. This ought to be pretty good. I'm going to take it and tie a knot. And I really could use an extra finger here. Okay, so there's a knot, and then we'll tie our bow. I could have left my ends a little longer, but this will work. Don't think I'm even going to trim them. Okay, so then let's pop this up on dimensionals. On my other card, I did not pop it up, but we'll see what that looks like. Okay, so then we're going to layer this onto this layer. Okay, another thing, on this one I sponged the edge. I think this one will just leave it alone. I think the dimension of the, the dimensionals helps with that. And let's put some adhesive down here. Now, you could add a sentiment, you can move your string up or down, but I think that's a gorgeous card. Hope you enjoyed.